Someone is making a decision about you right now, a decision that carries more weight than you realize. It is not a passing thought. It is not a temporary feeling that appears one day and disappears the next. It is something much deeper, something that has settled into their mind and heart and refuses to leave. They may not speak about it. They may not reveal it to anyone around them. In fact, they may work very hard to appear unaffected. To the outside world, they seem normal. They continue with their routines. They go to work. They spend time with friends. They smile when expected. They fulfill responsibilities and move through life as though everything is exactly as it should be. But beneath that calm surface, something important is happening. You occupy more space in their thoughts than they would ever admit. Your name appears unexpectedly in their mind. Certain memories return without warning. Small moments that seemed ordinary at the time now carry unexpected significance. Conversations are replayed. Expressions are remembered. Details that should have faded remain vivid. There is a reason for this. You touched something inside them that they cannot easily explain. You awakened emotions they thought were buried. You brought attention to desires they had ignored. You reminded them of possibilities they had stopped believing in. Now they find themselves standing at a crossroads. One path asks them to move forward, to take a chance, to embrace uncertainty, to risk disappointment for the possibility of something meaningful. The other path asks them to stay where they are, to remain protected, to avoid vulnerability, to continue living inside familiar patterns that no longer satisfy them but still feel safe. Neither option feels easy. Every day they move back and forth between these possibilities. One moment they feel confident. The next moment they doubt themselves. One moment they imagine what could happen if they reached out. The next moment they convince themselves that silence is safer. This inner conflict has become exhausting. What makes it difficult is that the decision is not only about you, it is also about who they must become if they choose you. Real connection requires honesty. Real love requires courage. Real intimacy requires people to lower defenses they have spent years building. Many people say they want closeness. Far fewer are prepared for what true closeness demands. This person understands that if they move toward you, they cannot continue hiding from themselves. They will have to confront fears they have avoided for years. They will have to examine old wounds. They will have to challenge beliefs that have quietly shaped their choices. That is why this decision feels so important. You represent more than affection. You represent change, and change can be frightening. Human beings often say they want transformation. Yet when transformation arrives, it rarely looks comfortable. It asks people to release familiar habits. It asks them to step into uncertainty. It asks them to trust before guarantees exist. That is exactly where this person finds themselves now. Part of them wants to run toward what they feel. Another part wants to retreat. They wonder if they are ready. They wonder if they are enough. They wonder whether they can handle the emotional depth this connection requires. These questions follow them everywhere. Late at night, when distractions disappear, they return. During quiet moments, they return. In the spaces between responsibilities, they return. And every time they return, they lead back to you. What they may not fully understand is that the strongest connections often awaken both love and fear at the same time. Love invites expansion, fear warns against risk. When both emotions appear together, people can feel trapped between two competing forces. That is exactly what is happening. Their heart continues moving toward you. Their fears continue pulling backward. The result is hesitation. But hesitation should never be mistaken for indifference. Many people stay silent, not because they feel nothing. They stay silent because they feel too much. Strong emotions can be overwhelming. They can expose insecurities. They can reveal vulnerabilities that someone has worked hard to conceal. This person is beginning to understand something important. Avoiding the truth does not make the truth disappear. Ignoring emotions does not erase them. Delaying a decision does not remove its consequences. Every day that passes brings new awareness. Every day that passes makes it harder to pretend that nothing matters. Because something does matter. You matter. The impact you had on their life matters. The way they felt around you matters. The possibilities connected to you matter. There was something about your presence that stayed with them. Perhaps it was the way you listened. Perhaps it was the way you understood things that others missed. Perhaps it was the feeling of being seen without judgment. Whatever it was, it left a mark. Not all encounters leave lasting impressions. Many people enter our lives briefly and fade into memory. But some individuals create a different effect. They become reference points. They change the way we see ourselves. They challenge assumptions. They reveal new perspectives. They remind us that life can hold more meaning than we previously imagined. You became that kind of presence. That realization continues to grow inside them, and as it grows, so does the pressure to make a choice. Because eventually, every person reaches a moment when remaining undecided becomes its own decision. They are approaching that moment now. The questions are becoming harder to ignore. What happens if they wait too long? What happens if they allow fear to decide for them? What happens if an opportunity disappears while they are still debating whether to act? These thoughts have become impossible to avoid. At the same time, another realization is beginning to emerge. They are starting to recognize your value more clearly. Distance often creates perspective. Silence often reveals importance. When someone is no longer constantly available, their significance becomes easier to understand. This person is beginning to see things differently. They are noticing qualities they once overlooked. They are appreciating moments they once took for granted. They are recognizing the emotional impact you had long after those moments passed. And while all of this unfolds inside them, something important is happening inside you as well. You are growing. You are evolving. You are learning not to place your life on hold while waiting for someone else's clarity. That growth matters. When you focus on your own path, something shifts. You become stronger. You become more grounded. You become less dependent on outcomes you cannot control. Ironically, this is often the moment when others begin seeing you most clearly, because confidence creates its own energy. Self-respect creates its own presence. People notice when someone stops chasing validation and starts living fully. Whether this person acts tomorrow, next week, or sometime later, one truth remains unchanged. Your worth does not depend on their decision. Your value exists independently of their fears, doubts, or confusion. The connection may be real, the feelings may be genuine, the possibility may still exist, but your life was never meant to be paused while someone else figures out their heart. Continue moving forward. Continue building your future. Continue becoming the person you are meant to be. Because while they are navigating their internal battle, you are writing your own story, and stories become powerful when they continue moving. The truth is that something inside them is changing. Awareness has already begun. Once awareness begins, it rarely stops. The questions become louder. The emotions become clearer. The truth becomes harder to ignore. And whether they are ready to admit it or not, they are approaching a moment of decision. A moment when fear can no longer hide behind excuses. A moment when silence can no longer pretend to be safety. A moment when they must decide whether to follow old patterns or step towards something real. Only they can make that choice. But one thing is certain, you have already changed them more than they expected. You have already become part of a journey they cannot easily forget. And somewhere within the quiet corners of their mind, a realization continues to grow. Some connections arrive for a reason. Some people appear at exactly the right time. And some decisions have the power to change the direction of an entire life. Carl Jung observed that people will go to great lengths to avoid facing their own souls. Right now, that is exactly what this person is experiencing. They are standing face to face with parts of themselves they have avoided for a long time. That confrontation creates tension. It creates hesitation. It creates a constant back and forth movement between what they feel and what they fear. One moment they feel pulled toward you. They imagine what it would be like to finally step forward. They imagine finding the courage to speak honestly, to reveal their feelings, and to choose love instead of uncertainty. Then another moment arrives. Fear takes over. Retreat feels safer. Distance feels easier. Silence feels like control. They convince themselves that waiting will somehow solve everything. They hope that time will make the decision for them. But time does not erase connections that carry real meaning. Time often does the opposite. It makes those connections clearer. As the days pass, they notice something they cannot ignore. Life feels different without you. It feels less colorful, less alive, less meaningful in ways they struggle to explain. You did not simply occupy space in their life. You changed the way they felt. You changed the way they saw themselves. Even now, that impact remains. Because of that, the decision they are facing becomes impossible to avoid. Another layer of conflict begins to emerge. It is no longer only about desire. It becomes about responsibility. Their questions become deeper. They wonder if they can show up consistently. They wonder if they can be emotionally available instead of emotionally distant. They wonder if they can protect a meaningful connection instead of sabotaging it when fear appears. They wonder if they can love fully without hiding behind walls they have spent years building. These questions feel heavy because they understand something important. Choosing you would require more than feelings. It would require effort. It would require honesty. It would require commitment. There would be no room for games, confusion, mixed signals, or endless waiting. They understand that you deserve clarity. They understand that choosing you would require integrity, and integrity requires growth. Deep love is rarely simple. It asks people to reflect on themselves. It asks them to confront uncomfortable truths. It asks them to become more than they were yesterday. Many people hesitate when they reach this point, not because they do not care, but because they care deeply. They understand that fully entering your life would require them to face parts of themselves they have been avoiding. They would need to confront habits that no longer serve them. They would need to challenge old beliefs. They would need to become stronger, more honest, and more emotionally mature. Jung often spoke about the pain that comes with self-awareness. Growth is uncomfortable. Transformation is uncomfortable. Love that changes a person is uncomfortable. That is exactly where they are standing now. They feel the pressure of change. They feel the weight of what this connection represents. Because this is not simply about romance. It is about evolution. It is about becoming someone new. And every meaningful transformation comes with a cost. That cost makes hesitation feel safe. At the same time, it makes hesitation feel painful. While they struggle with this internal conflict, they also notice something changing in you. Even if you have not announced it, even if you have not spoken about it, they can feel it. Your energy has shifted. You are chasing less. You are explaining less. You are no longer reaching endlessly into silence hoping for answers. Instead, you seem more grounded, more centered, more focused on your own path. This change affects them more than they expected. The illusion of control disappears when someone stops waiting. When someone chooses themselves, the entire dynamic changes. Your life continues moving forward. Your happiness no longer depends on their decision. Your value remains intact whether they act or not. And that reality forces them to confront something important. Time is moving. Life is moving. Opportunities do not wait forever. As they watch you continue forward, a sense of urgency begins to grow inside them. They start imagining possibilities they once avoided. They imagine you finding peace without them. They imagine you meeting someone new. They imagine you closing a chapter quietly and completely. Not with anger, not with drama, simply with acceptance. That possibility unsettles them. It awakens fears they have tried to suppress. It forces them to consider what they might lose if they continue hesitating. For the first time, the consequences feel real. They begin realizing that love is not only about emotions. Love is also about courage. Love is also about accountability. Love is also about choosing to show up when fear says run. A deeper vulnerability starts to emerge. They begin admitting things to themselves they once avoided. They begin acknowledging how much this connection mattered. They begin recognizing how much your presence affected them. And with that recognition comes fear. Fear of rejection. Fear of disappointment. Fear of being fully seen. Fear of failing someone who genuinely matters. Fear of reopening wounds they believed had already healed. Sometimes this fear causes them to freeze. They convince themselves that staying still is harmless. They tell themselves that postponing a decision creates safety. But deep down, they are beginning to understand the truth. Every day spent avoiding a choice is still a choice. Every moment of hesitation creates consequences. Every opportunity delayed carries a cost. A quiet regret begins forming beneath the surface. It is subtle at first, almost invisible, but it grows. They start feeling the weight of what is not happening. The conversations that never occur, the feelings that remain unspoken, the possibilities that remain unexplored. Eventually, they recognize a difficult truth. Not choosing is not neutral. Avoidance has consequences. If they choose you, they risk vulnerability. If they do not choose you, they risk regret, and regret often lasts longer than heartbreak. Heartbreak can heal. Regret can remain for years. That realization becomes impossible to ignore. This is why you continue occupying space in their thoughts. This is why distractions fail to replace what they felt. This is why silence brings discomfort rather than peace. Through this connection, they are learning something important about themselves. They are discovering that emotional safety without depth feels empty. Comfort without genuine connection leaves something missing. Avoidance no longer satisfies them the way it once did. The question is no longer whether they feel something. The question has become whether they have the courage to honor what they feel. Meanwhile, your role remains unchanged. You are not responsible for convincing them. You are not responsible for proving your worth. You are not responsible for carrying the burden of their confusion. Your responsibility is to yourself, to your growth, to your peace, to your future. Your power comes from remaining aligned with who you are. It comes from honoring your own journey. It comes from continuing forward regardless of what someone else decides. As you become more confident in your value, something interesting happens. Clarity increases. The path becomes simpler. Either they find the courage to meet you where you stand, or they step aside. Both outcomes move your life forward. Both outcomes support your growth. Because the most important transformation is not happening within them. It is happening within you. And as that transformation continues, they begin facing another realization. Choosing you is not simply choosing a relationship. It is choosing a higher standard for themselves. It is choosing responsibility. It is choosing consistency. It is choosing emotional maturity. It is choosing authenticity over fear. That realization can feel intimidating. Many people enjoy the idea of connection. Far fewer are prepared for the responsibility that real connection requires. Some people are comfortable longing for something from a distance, but they struggle when it becomes time to fully participate. They struggle when love requires action. They struggle when vulnerability becomes unavoidable. That is why hesitation often appears. That is why rationalization appears. That is why withdrawal appears. Beneath all of it sits the same truth. Fear. Fear of failing. Fear of loss. Fear of discovering whether they are truly capable of sustaining something meaningful. You touch something deep inside them. You force them to examine their capacity, not just for attraction, not just for affection, but for consistency, for presence, for reliability, for emotional honesty. And that examination can be uncomfortable, because once someone sees the truth about themselves, they can no longer pretend not to see it. That is where they are now, standing between fear and growth, standing between comfort and transformation, standing between who they have been and who they could become. And with every passing day, the fear of losing you becomes more real. The possibility of your absence becomes harder to ignore. The weight of this connection becomes heavier. Because authentic connections leave traces. They leave marks on memory. They leave impressions on the heart. They leave echoes that remain long after the moment itself has passed. And no matter how much they try to move away from what they feel, the truth continues following them. The fear of loss is no longer a distant possibility. It has become real. And that reality is forcing them to confront everything they have been avoiding. Your moving on begins to feel possible, real, and unavoidable. It is no longer just an idea in your mind. It starts to feel like something that is actually happening, something that cannot be stopped or reversed. At the same time, you continue walking your own path. You are no longer standing still for anyone's confusion. Your movement, your choices, and your direction start to create a strong inner field around you. This field quietly pulls things into alignment in your life. It shapes how others respond to you without you needing to say anything at all. But your attention is no longer scattered. It is focused on your own growth. Every step you take now strengthens your self-respect. Every decision reinforces your integrity. Every action confirms that you are no longer living in emotional uncertainty. Whether they choose to act or stay silent, your life continues forward. You are no longer waiting for anyone to define your worth. Your energy becomes steady, grounded, and clear. There is direction in everything you do now, a sense of inner stability that does not depend on external validation. This creates a quiet but powerful shift. Your value is no longer something you are trying to prove. It is something you are living, something you are expressing through your presence, your boundaries, and your choices. Their hesitation no longer defines the situation. Their confusion no longer controls the outcome. What matters more now is that you have stepped into awareness of your own worth. This change affects everything around you. Respect begins to rise naturally. Attraction deepens in unexpected ways. Emotional tension starts to shift into clarity. What once felt uncertain now begins to reveal its true shape. The most important movement has already happened within you. That internal shift becomes the foundation for everything else. Patience no longer means waiting at the expense of yourself. Love no longer means disappearing into someone else's uncertainty. Understanding does not require you to abandon your own needs or silence your own truth. You are not meant to pause your life indefinitely while someone else struggles with their fears. You are not meant to hold yourself in emotional suspension while another person decides what they want. Instead, your role is to stay aligned with your truth, to continue building a life that feels grounded, meaningful, and self-respecting. Every boundary you maintain sends a message. Every choice you make reinforces your direction. When someone begins to sense that your energy is no longer orbiting their indecision, something changes inside them. Not because you are angry, not because you are distant out of punishment, but because you are evolving. This evolution is what makes the shift unavoidable. They begin to feel that your life is no longer waiting. It is moving forward with or without them. This is the moment where real decisions begin to form, not out of fear of losing you, but out of recognition of your value. Either they step forward with clarity, courage, and responsibility, or they step back and allow the connection to end with dignity and acceptance. There is no permanent middle ground in situations like this. Emotional uncertainty cannot remain forever without consequence. This is where something deeper begins to take place. Not punishment, not reward, but alignment. Connections that are meant to grow find a way through honesty and courage. Connections that are not ready for growth naturally dissolve or shift into distance. Both outcomes serve a purpose. Both lead to learning. Both support emotional evolution. Slowly, quietly, something begins moving toward resolution. It may show up later as a message, a realization, a confession, or even silence that finally speaks clearly. Until that moment arrives, your most powerful position is stability within yourself. The moment you stop negotiating your value, everything around you begins to respond differently. Pressure begins to build, not as force from outside, but as awareness from within. When a decision is delayed for too long, life itself starts to create clarity. They begin to experience thoughts they cannot ignore. Memories return. Emotions resurface. Moments replay in their mind with new intensity. A sense of restlessness appears that they cannot easily explain. There is a growing internal voice that tells them something important cannot remain unresolved forever. Distraction starts to lose its power. Avoidance becomes heavier than confrontation. What once felt safe begins to feel uncomfortable. They start noticing something they did not want to see before. Staying undecided is not actually protecting them, it is draining them. Silence and delay do not reduce emotional weight. They increase it. The longer they wait, the more it builds inside them. Patterns they have relied on before begin to surface in awareness, pulling away when things become serious. Overthinking emotions instead of feeling them, delaying vulnerability in hopes that feelings will fade. But now these patterns are harder to ignore, because this connection has made them more aware of themselves. And once awareness begins, it cannot be undone. They start realizing that if these patterns continue, they will not only affect this connection, but also repeat across their life in different forms. At this point, the connection becomes something deeper than just two people. It becomes a mirror of their inner world, a reflection of who they are when faced with emotional truth. One path leads toward growth, honesty, and emotional maturity. The other leads toward comfort, avoidance, and familiar patterns that no longer serve them. The realization becomes clear. They are standing at a crossroads. Carl Jung explained that a person does not become aware of themselves by only focusing on light, but by making the unconscious parts of the self visible. In this moment, their inner fears become visible to them. Fear of intimacy, fear of not being enough, fear of being fully seen without protection. You have brought these shadows into awareness, not by force, but by presence, not by demand, but by reflection.